Η επόμενη εισήγηση με τίτλο «Η επίδραση της Αθωνικής αρχιτεκτονικής στην δημιουργία Ρωσο-Βυζαντινού ρυθμού στα πρώτα χρόνια του 20ου αιώνα» θα παρουσιαστεί από την κυρία Αριάνδη. Έχει και ελληνικό όνομα, εξαιρετικό, πολύ όμορφο όνομα. Την Dr. Voronova. Dr. Voronova.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'll speak English. Dear fathers, dear pateras, dear colleagues, first of all, I would like to thank organizer of this very important conference and to heartily welcome all of you from our St. Tikhon Orthodox Theological University and from all Russia. How to... Here. No? The Russian-Byzantine style has become one of the expressions of the architecture of historism in Russia, which spread in the European architecture of the mid-19th, early 20th century. This phenomenon developed within the pan-European rise of interest in the national architecture, but in Russia it was especially related with Byzantium because of the continuity of Russian architecture from Byzantine architecture. Russian-Byzantine style emerged in the Russian architecture of 1830s and began to develop due to the first discoveries of Byzantine monuments as well as to the support of the Russian imperial power. Since 1815, the Academy of Fine Arts of St. Petersburg established a special class for teaching Byzantine iconography and architecture, and sent expeditions to Athos. Greek architecture, in particular the oldest of the Athonite monasteries, great lover of St. Athanasius, Vatopedi, and Hilandar, had a great influence on Russian architecture of this period. At the same time, the designing of the first architectural buildings in Byzantine style on the territory of the Russian Empire was started. St. Prince Vladimir Church in Kiev, and then also St. Vladimir churches in Chersonesus near Sevastopol, the site of the baptism of St. Vladimir, and just in the city of Sevastopol. Since this style embodied the idea of continuity of Orthodox and monarchy from Byzantine to Russia, it has strong support of the Russian imperial power. In St. Petersburg, in the then capital of the Russian Empire, first of all, the Greek church of St. Dimitri of Thessaloniki was built, and it was related to the Greek embassy. A lot of other churches were also built. Monastery of St. Ioan of Kronstadt, and later St. Nicholas Naval Cathedral in Kronstadt, Church of the Kazan icon of the Mother of God in the Voskresensky Novodevichi convent, and many others. The Byzantine style became the leading style in Russia, and it led to appearance of many splendid churches and monasteries throughout the former Russian Empire. The clearest example is the new Athos monastery of St. Simon Canonite in Abkhazia, then Valaam Transfiguration Monastery, churches in Sormovo near Nizhny Novgorod, Kovno, Kaunas in Lithuania, Riga, Kharkov, Tiflis, Tbilisi, Chisinau, Moldova, Evpatoria in Crimea, and many others. Moreover, Russian architects built a lot of Byzantine churches all over the world during this period. For example, the Cathedral of St. Alexander Nevsky in Sofia. In Moscow and its suburbs, it was, for example, the Pokrov Monastery in Khotkovo near the Holy Trinity St. Sergius Lavra, the Church of Vatopedi, icon of the Mother of God in Moscow, and St. Trinity Church in Shurovo near Moscow. In this style, public buildings with inside chapels were also built in Russia, including hospitals, shelters, and educational institutions. These objects were characterized by the use of unplastered facades of red brick. An example of connection of church institutions with inside chapels may serve the Hospice of Brothers Boevs in Moscow with inside St. Nicholas Chapel. The combination of Byzantine, Old Russian, and Orthodox motifs in brick technique became a particular characteristic of architecture of diocesan educational institutions across Russia, which created the so-called diocesan style in this period. The most striking example is the building of diocesan schools in Tomsk. One of such examples of the Moscow Diocesan is the Moscow Diocesan House, an architectural and memorial monument of Russian church history of the early 20th century. In this anniversary year of the Faithful for Russia events, we would like to elaborate on the history and architecture of this wonderful church building, now owned by our St. Tikhon Orthodox University. The Moscow Diocesan House was built in 1901-1903 on the initiative of Moscow Metropolitan Vladimir Bogoyevlensky. The main purpose of this building was creating of educational spiritual center for the development of missionary and educational activities among the common people during the terrible pre-revolutionary period in Russia. The building was designed by diocesan architect Peter Vinogradov, the author of many churches and public buildings across Russia. Among the most famous are the Cathedral of Iron Icon of Mother of God of St. Nicholas Pererva Monastery in Moscow and the St. Trinity Cathedral of the Vixen Iveron Convent near Nizhny Novgorod. Each of these churches is a grand five-domed magnificent structure accommodating up to 4,000 parishioners. Also, architect Peter Vinogradov completed the reconstruction of St. John Chrysostom Church in the Nativity Monastery in Moscow in Russian style of the 17th century, and his last works were in the Monastery of Icon of Mother of God, Joy of All Who Sorrow in Moscow. So, back to the Moscow Diocesan House. The center of two-story brick building of the house with a basement and a bell tower is a large hall on the second floor. The assembly hall with the capacity of 1,500 seats connected with the inside church of St. Prince Vladimir. Moreover, the assembly hall and the inside church can be used either together when the dividing partition is closed or separately. All activities were formed around the center, the small hall, reading room of the diocesan libraries, and halls of the grand staircase adjacent to the assembly hall. Lower two-story wings with various premises were adjacent to the high central part from the north and south. Eastern chamber between the assembly hall and wings were also lowered. It enabled the devices of the upper light for the hall front stairs. The center of the western facade was marked by the bell tower. The dome dominated in the image of the building from the east. The construction of the Moscow Diocesan House was funded by the diocese and private donations, and among the contributors were members of the royal family. While the building was under construction, religious processions often went to it. The Moscow Diocesan House was solemnly consecrated on December 30, 1903, by Metropolitan Vladimir of concelebration of numerous clergy. In 1917, 1918, it was here where the meetings of the local council of the Russian Orthodox Church were held, which adopted a decision on the restoration of the Patriarchate and the election of the Holy Patriarch Tikhon, as well as many other decisions which reconciled and united the Russian society in the face of severe adversities. Many members of council suffered for the faith and were canonized. The election of His Holiness Patriarch Tikhon took place on 18th of November 1917, and this year, on this day, we celebrated the 100th anniversary of his election and the 25th anniversary of our university that bears his name. In the autumn of 1918, the work of the local council was forcibly interrupted, and in 1922, the Diocesan House was finally closed, its museum collection and library were plundered, the decoration of St. Vladimir Church was destroyed. In 1931, under the direction of architect George Oltarzhevsky, the house was rebuilt beyond recognition in the style of constructivism. On the right wing, 4 floors were built, the bell tower and the golden dome of St. Vladimir Church were demolished. For a long time, cinema and recording studio were located in the building. The church part of the building was divided into 6 overlapping levels on which the mechanical workshops and warehouse were located. In the early 1990s, after the Fell's bankruptcy, the property passed into private hands. Since the foundation of our St. Tikhon Orthodox Theological Institute in 1992, our rector, Archpriest Vladimir Vorobyov, raised the issue of the return for the former diocesan house and transfer it into the new school. However, there was no response from the Moscow authorities. For 12 years, the struggle for the return of the building was fought. First, we lost 20 lawsuits, but we didn't know why. We had an obvious claim. The house is the church property with the church inside, which was built by Russian Orthodox Church and originally belonged to the church. Finally, we found an advocate, a specialist in Fell's bankruptcies, and he explained to us the reason of judicial losses. Before each meeting, our claim was slightly changed without our knowledge, and it became losing. Now our advocate formulated the claim that it was impossible to quietly change. The day before the 21st court session, our lawyer was killed. He left family, children. The new owner appealed, but we won 9 of the courts, and only after that, after 30 trials in 2004, the Diocesan House was returned to ownership of the Russian Orthodox Church for our St. Tikhon Orthodox University. Our concept of reconstruction for placement of such university is reviving the idea inherent in the initial project, a creation of educational spiritual center on the base of Orthodox University. Just such a unique educational institution, combining theological education with the secular Orthodox National Academy, was opened in the Diocesan House in 1918. Having got a huge dilapidated and disfigured building, we were faced with a very difficult problem of the implementation of the idea about its revival. On the basis of the conducted researches and the surviving drawings and photographs, the reconstruction project and restoration documentation was developed. But holding such a huge repair and reconstruction of a historic building during the economic crisis would be impossible without the support of His Holiness Patriarch of Moscow and all Russia, Kirill, who attract donors for the restoration of Diocesan House. Here you can see the planting of the crosses on the dome of church and bell tower. And here is the assembly hall during the restoration and after it now. And here the other spaces of the building. However, the final reconstruction of this holy place was accomplished due to the inclusion into the presidential program of celebration of the 1000th anniversary of the repose of St. Prince Vladimir in July 2015, which was widely celebrated throughout Russia. All restoration work was carried out under the supervision of our state organs of monument protection and our Art Council. On 26th of July 2015, His Holiness Patriarch Kirill celebrated the great consecration of this building and its two inside churches. The second newly created inside church was consecrated in honor of Saint Patriarch Tikhon and new martyrs, members of the local council of 1917-1918. In the medallions of the arch of the assembly hall, it was decided to portray the iconic portraits of the main saint heroes of the events. On this arch, the portraits of these saint heroes of the events that took place here under the chair of the Presidium. Painting of both churches were made in Byzantine style by teachers and students of the Faculty of Church Art of St. Tikhon University. The next day after the consecration, on July 27, 2015, the restored building was visited by the President of Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, who praised the value of the Moscow Diocesan House for the history and culture of Russia. According to our rector, Archpriest Vladimir Vorobyov, the revival of Diocesan House is a miracle that brings to mind the words of the prophet Ezekiel about the dry bones that the Lord revived. The victim Diocesan House, desecrated holy place, was raised from the dead and raises in glory and power. The holy activity which has begun at this place started again. We believe that this miracle takes place by the grace of God and the prayers of the saint martyrs who worked there and defended their faith. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Voronova, thank you. Υπάρχουν ερωτήσεις για την κυρία Voronova?
If you have any questions, my colleague Andrei will translate from Greek to Russian.
Okay. Any questions? Well, I don't see any questions. We thank you very much for this beautiful presentation, those magnificent photographs, the old and the new ones.
Thank you very much. I hope that the whole is clear.
Oh yes, I think you support it clear enough that there is influence from the Athonite architecture, but those churches are huge in comparison to the churches in Mount Athos.
Yes.
Very large.
Please, Professor.
Thank you for this wonderful presentation. Just a small question. Who was the teacher of these students who painted in Byzantine style in Moscow? That means
it's the teachers of our
school.
Mm-hmm. It's the teachers of our university. They learned in St. Trinity Sergius Lavra and in Surikov's institute, art institute in Moscow, and another famous Moscow schools.
How many students do you have in your university?
We have about 10,000 students and
goodness.
about 10 faculties. theological, philological, pedagogical, church music, fine arts, church arts, and many others.
Very impressive, very impressive.
Thank you.
Well, thank you once again. Thank you.